Hi there, and welcome into the Long Distance Lounge. My name is Tim Sweeney, and this is a podcast where we travel kind of virtually to meet people doing cool things with their lives in cool places. And this one's no exception. We're catching up with an old friend of mine named Andrew Hood. He is a journalist who covers the world of professional cycling. So he spends his life putting his microphone in the face of guys dressed in Lycra who go really fast up and down mountains. Andrew's based in Spain. He's been married to a Spanish woman now for a while. He's American, I should say. And I met Hoodie, as he's known to a lot of us, way back when I was just a journalist out of school for a small town newspaper in Colorado. And he was coming in doing some freelance work for the paper because his life was a lot cooler than ours. He was covering professional ski races in the wintertime. Then he was heading off to Europe in the summer to cover pro bike races. And this is when I believe bike racing was really exploding in the U.S. So it's always been huge in Europe, obviously. But we'll talk with him about that. He's made a career out of this, which is kind of amazing, actually, starting from the print journalism world, working with the Denver Post and the Vale Daily and other newspapers, and stringing, which means kind of freelancing and just hustling. He's really hustled to make this whole thing work. And now he's 2+ decades on doing this, still doing it. And he's one of the big voices in the world of cycling. He's a very, very good writer, in my opinion. If you read his writing on cycling, it's tight, crisp. I've always admired that about his writing. And he really tells the story well. So we'll hear from him about how you might want to go see the Tour de France or one of these other big bike races in Europe. I know a lot of people want to do that. It's a bucket list travel thing for some fans. I've talked to a lot of people in the U.S. who want to do that, and Andrew can tell us how. He's going to give us a little insight on how you can plan your trip. We're also going to talk a bit about the changing landscape of media, because he has lived it all, from print journalism to now where things might be being broken in tweets or whatever you call them now on X in 20 words or less. But we'll talk about how he's kind of evolved with the times and had to evolve to keep the career going. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it with Andrew Hood, a professional cycling journalist based in Spain. Hoodie, or Andrew Hood, as he's known by his pen name, I guess his real name. How are you, man? Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, good to see you, Tim. It's been a
long
while.
time. It has. A long time. We go way back. So for anyone listening, you should know that. You slept on my couch one time. I don't know if you remember that.
That was way back in the day.
It was way back. You're established now. You're gallivanting around the globe as a big-time cycling journalist. So, well, let's start there. You're from Colorado. That is where you once or twice crashed on my couch, because you were a big Denver journalist guy, and you would come up. I was working in Vail, Colorado, as a cub reporter, I guess you'd say, and you would come up and help put out the paper. And I remember going, yeah, this guy's, he's good. You could really write, and you still can write, I must say. How the hell did you end up where you are now, which is in Spain, traveling the world, following cyclists everywhere? Cool life. How did you get there?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination, really, of just being at the right place at the right time and having kind of a vision, or not really a plan, but like taking advantage of opportunities when they came my way. I remember, like, way back in the day, back in those Vale days, a buddy and I, we were working at the Vale Daily, where, that's kind of where it all started for me and some of our communal friends. Basically, we said, what's your dream job? And we said, covering the World Cup skiing in the winter and covering the Tour de France in the summer. And man, back in those days, that was a pretty elusive dream, like the media landscape was very different. It's really just the old legacy media. There was no internet yet. There was no iPhones. All the social media didn't exist. So back in those days, it was like, getting a gig with the AP, maybe working for a real specialized magazine, or, working for one of the real big major newspapers that might cover the Olympic sports or covering the tour. And those were literally like 3 people had those jobs in the world. So it was kind of like shooting for the moon, and somehow I landed here.
Yeah, and you've kept it going, which we'll get into that. I want to talk about how the media landscape changed, because you've been front row seat to all that and survived it, which is even more impressive. But you grew up in the Denver area, Denver proper or near Denver, correct?
Yeah, my parents moved to Denver when I was in high school. So
Okay.
my junior year in high school, moved from Chicago.
Okay.
I was actually born in Texas, lived in Georgia. My father had a corporate job. We got bounced around when we were growing up younger.
Right.
Lived in Chicago and then moved to Denver when I was like 16. And that was like a life-changing experience, right? I mean, like living in Colorado in high school,
Mhm.
having the Rocky Mountains right there in your backyard was just, just changed everything for me.
Right. So is this how you got into this world? Because cycling in the U.S. then was not what it is now, as far as there's like this crazy group of people hardcore people that follow cycling. It's grown a ton in the last 20 years, or am I speaking out of turn there?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, cycling's always been like this participatory sport, right?
Yeah.
Everyone rides a bike growing up as kids. The bike racing scene, it's a European sport really, in terms of its historic roots. But, American cycling's always been there. It's always been kind of a fringe sport. It's certainly become more mainstream now, thanks to the Tour, thanks to the successes of all the Americans that have gone there. Now we got the Tour de France Femme. The sport's growing with gravel. More people are racing. A lot of people are riding their bikes. So cycling, I think, in terms of participatory sports in the United States, I think it's like right there, number 1, 2, 3, with golf and running. So cycling's always been there, but it's like bike racing. That was a niche of a niche of a niche for sure. Yeah, I mean, when I moved to Colorado, it was, as I was always just a big kind of keen cyclist. But a high school buddy of mine, his dad was a masters racer, like an over 35, which seemed like ancient when we were 16, right?
Right.
So we'd go to the races with him every weekend around Colorado, and that's when the whole kind of Colorado scene was really booming. Had the old Coors Classic bike race. That's when the 7-Eleven team got its roots really from Colorado. So you had all these like, original pioneering American cyclists, the Greg LeMonds, the Davis Finneys, the Ron Kiefels. And these guys were riding weekend criteriums. And my friend's dad was racing against like Len Pettyjohn, who was like a legendary race organizer and building up teams and stuff. So we were like thrown into this culture,
Right.
when I was like 16, 17 years old. So we would ride, train, we would ride all over Colorado on our bikes, go with my friend's dad and his training groups. And I dabbled a little bit in racing, but never
really?
on the roadside. It was like, I did a few crits and I crashed and I was like, my cojones aren't that big.
Yeah, you do need those for sure.
You need those in the
people-
roads. And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
about the same time, the whole mountain biking thing started taking off. So, kind of like right there in the early days, not really knowing it, just being there right in the early days of cycling.
Yeah.
But even at that point, I never imagined being a journalist or writing about it. It was just a passion journey for me at that point.
Right. That this could actually be a job someday. That's it's funny you mentioned that because I just remembered even as a kid growing up in Massachusetts, one time there was the cycling race in my hometown, which is suburban Boston, and they did like I don't know why this number sticks in my head, 88 laps around this kind of loop in the center of town. And you just went up and watched them, and it was insane. I don't even know what level it was, but like you would get glimpses of the sport, I guess. This is like in the probably late 80s or something, but then not again, until the Tour de France became like broadcasted all the time on TV. And it was almost like a travel show is when it first started for people who you were a bit kind of following with one eye. So take me back. You get through school, graduate from, did you go to CU?
Yeah. CU Boulder. Yeah.
Yep. So you finished there. You're a journalist right away, I guess, doing Denver. You worked for the Vale Daily up in the mountains, where a lot of you guys met and are still friends of that whole crew, I guess. Then you worked out of Denver some. The cycling thing starts picking up. I mean, there's guys, was it like, I may have the wrong year, but is there like Tyler Hamilton, people like this who were like before Armstrong started winning races, it starts to take off. And you're, as you said, is that like right time, right place? And you start going over a little bit to Europe. And how does that evolve to where you're doing it kind of full time?
Yeah. It was definitely being in the right place at the right time because, I finished university at Boulder. I started working around some of the Front Range newspapers, Longmont Times Call, Boulder Camera, doing a little bit of freelance for maybe the Denver Post. But, getting a clip in the Denver Post, man, that was like, that was a
Right.
big deal when you were like a 21-year-old kid.
Yeah, because it's all established journalists who've been there for 20 years and stuff, right? So you're just trying to break through with a bunch of other guys, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, the newspaper industry, man, it's just so sad to see it just absolutely be decimated by new media because, for so many years, it's the newspaper wars, that hunt for the news. You really were on the front lines of informing, basically society of what was going on.
Yep.
And started dabbling in different things. And so I was traveling a lot. I was kind of like obsessed with traveling. So I went to Asia, I went to South America, just doing backpacker before I got too serious. And then just came back in my mid-20s and landed the job at the Vail Daily, which was just, it was like journalism 101, but like real life stuff, Right. You worked up there, it was like you covered school board meetings, you covered a forest fire, you covered ski racing, you wrote about Vail Resorts, which was this mega big Wall Street level company. The diversity of stories there were just, insane. And, being in a daily newspaper, again, this is all pre-internet. So remember back in those days, man, the Vail Trail, the Vail Daily, they were like 160 pages a day.
Right.
And you had to fill that thing up.
Yeah, for Ski Valley. Yeah, it's funny. I kind of forgot that because, so you were a few years ahead of me at the Vail Daily, which is kind of the established big paper. I got my first job out of school was the Vail Trail, which was becoming the Daily Trail. It's privately owned, family owned, working for your buddy, Dave Williams. Nice of him to hire me. I was 22, I think. Yeah. And I'd done some sports stuff through college, internships and things like this. But you're right. I always tell people still to this day, that's probably the most challenging day-to-day job I had. Because if you want to write, which I did like you and still do, but not made the journalism career out of it like you kind of have two choices, which is go to a big newspaper, especially if it's sports or something, be doing agates like box scores and just almost like a glorified intern, right? And proofing and editing things here and there. And you have to wait your turn to actually write. Or you go to a smaller community like that and you kind of get the fire hose fired at you, basically, because I was covering two municipalities, Minturn, Avon. There were fires. There was a environmental attack. It was crazy. And they were, the Cub Reporter, I'm at town council meetings trying to figure out what the hell a Vail Resorts lawyer is talking about to the town council about properties. It's just like you said, you learn everything and you screw up along the way. It's quite stressful because it's in print the next day and you can't take it back. But yeah, I guess you had the same experience, but you do feel like, okay, now I can kind of do anything. I've survived this.
Yeah, it's interesting too with community journalism, where, you would see the parents of the high school kid football game that you wrote about. You'd see them that next week at the game and they'd get in your face. Or, you wrote about, somebody's business or somebody's, a politician or whatever. When you work at a big daily, a national daily or a major metro daily, you were kind of immune from all that.
That's true.
So when you were like back in those days at the community level, I remember just how much impact the media has on people's lives. And you really learn that. I took that to kind of heart too. It'd be like,
same.
If I was writing a story about myself, what's fair, you have to learn those lines, because it's always changing in terms of being fair, being informative, but you want to make the story spicy enough so people are going to read it, but you have to be balanced. So, those guardrails are just constantly changing as the media landscapes change. But yeah, those years in Vail were amazing. So when I was there in the 90s, then I got the job that, part of my journey was I got this dream job of being the ski editor at the Vail Daily, which was, what a job, right? So basically it's like just writing about everything to do with skiing. And again, under that portfolio, man, it was everything from the corporate side of things, land acquisitions, mergers, IPOs, stock options, all the way to the other side was the recreational aspect of it, the industry of skiing, all the apparel, the ski tech, the gear, the racing, the competition, the weather, the mountains. It was a fascinating beat. And so when I started doing that, that's just about the same time the internet hit. This is like the mid to late 90s.
Yep.
And that just opened up a huge new venue for media content, right?
Right.
So you had all these websites that wanted content. So I was right there in the front lines, very lucky to be in a place like Vail that anything that happened in Vail was inherently interesting. We had a lot of high-profile people coming to Vail. Princess Diana came to Vail. It was her first vacation after she divorced the Prince Charles.
Charles, yeah.
So, she came to Vail. I was the ski rider, so I started covering Princess Diana in Vail. And man, I was just making money. I was just selling stories to the Denver Post. At the time, my boss was like, so long as you let us print it first, you can, because they were not paying us very much money in those days.
Right. No, yeah.
As you remember, right?
So
they were cool about it. It's like, okay, if you write a story for us and you want to pitch a similar story to the Denver Post or the AP or to a website, they didn't have a problem with that. So that's when I started really getting into kind of these.
That's the hustle.
That's the hustle.
Hustle,
that's
basically.
The hustle of the life. But it was like, that's how, in fact, the irony is now where I work is Outside Magazine.
Yeah, Outside Media.
Now there's a new company that has bought Outside Magazine, and that's who I started really way back in the mid-'90s doing some online web stories with. Outside Online was one of the first major high-profile titles to really go heavy on the internet. So I started selling them stories all the time as well. So the circle kind of goes around.
Yeah. I was standing at I don't know how, I think Dave, the editor, he would send me to do just, hey, we don't have anything today. Take your skis, go to the mountain, find a story. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Go find the stories and talk to people on the chairlift. And that was the more like fluff stuff. There was a lot of real journalism though, and you learn a lot. I remember Steve mentioned the Princess Di thing. I was standing at a party in Beaver Creek as a reporter. Don't ask me why. I turned around and 5 feet away was former President Gerald Ford. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I and what am I going to write about? It's hilarious. It's just some gala, some afternoon thing. And because he lived there, he had a house there. The chairlift went right over his house. But yeah, it's a bit the center of the universe, a place like that, because famous people come to town and then things inevitably happen. So for someone like you who's like hustling and sharing stories, there is always that. Or someone picks up the phone and says, they know you're there, right? And they say, hey, we need 500 words on this, and you can go do it because you're connected. So because when I met you, you were done with the Vail Daily and you were, I think, working more in the Front Range, and you were coming up to kind of help out, put out the papers and stuff. I guess your buddy Dave was at the Daily Trail, and you were, then I know you started to get into that cycling world because this is when things started taking off for Americans in the bike racing world. So at some point, you know that sport and you're working on it, but it must have been a lot of legwork to kind of establish yourself in that world. This is a European game. I think you even got stories about competing with the Euro journalists just for FaceTime with people, right? Like you're fighting over ski, and even in ski corrals and places like that. This is a European thing. So at that time, you have to kind of nudge your way in, probably on more ways than one, correct?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was working for what later morphed into ESPN online. This was 1996 out of Seattle. It was back with this startup money and stuff. And so they said to me, we have a guy covering the Tour de France, but he said, we have $1,000 of extra budget. Would you go there to be his assistant? Kind of like help him out, just that's all we can pay you is $1,000. And again, going back to that dream, it's like, covering ski racing, because in those days I was covering kind of the European or the American side of the ski race, the North American legs of World Cup. It's at Lake Louise, it come to Vail, Aspen, different places.
Right.
So I was already had half of that equation was kind of happening. So then the guy said, hey, would you want to go to the tour for $1,000? And at that point, I was already kind of full-time freelance. I was working maybe seasonally, because I got a seasonal gig with the Denver Post covering. I was stringing for the Denver Post pretty regularly, and they always needed extra warm bodies around the holidays. So I was doing just old school legacy media, copy edit, deadline. It was like stressful job, old
Oh, yeah.
school deadline stress. So I was doing that in the winters. They paid me fairly well, pretty good day rate. I was freelancing. So the guy said, hey, go to the Tour de France. I was like, yeah, sign me up. And then the guy that was going to do it quit over money. Felt like he wasn't getting paid enough. So they said, well, how about, we wanted him to cover, the Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, Vuelta a España. Would you be interested in doing that? And I said, hell yeah. So it was like $100 a day they paid me, $100 a day. No expenses.
So you're like losing money? Basically?
Yeah, kind of losing money, but, it was like in those days, they still had the European currencies against the U.S. dollar.
Okay. Yep.
And I just said, how can I say no to this, right? So
of course, yeah.
I figured I'd go once. And, maybe the first year I lost money, but I saw it as an investment, really, in terms of,
Yep.
in terms of, here's an opportunity. Let's go with it. So for the next couple of years, I kind of did the summer in Europe and then came back in the winter and did skiing, Denver Post thing in the winter. That's how I started going up, helping out you guys, Davo, on the weekends or, during the week or whatever it was.
Yep.
And then started going every year to Europe, chasing these bike races and off to the races, as they say.
So which era of bike racing and bike racers is this, just to give people an idea of how it exploded? Because as you said, we say it again, right place, right time, but things just go crazy in the U.S. around bike racing for a couple of key reasons. So what's the era?
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. I kind of hit this middle kind of shoulder region of cycling in the United States because Greg LeMond had just retired in 1994. He was the first American to win the Tour de France. He was part of that first 80s boom of cycling. And then in the 1990s, man, there was this lull where there were not a lot of great racers, not winning big races. Armstrong was just coming up. I think 94, he won the world title in 93. So Lance was coming up, but he was not a big name really at that point.
Yeah.
And then, there really weren't a big Americans. Lance didn't win the Tour really until 99. So there was kind of this lull in terms of not really a whole lot of headline grabbing Americans racing at that moment. But, in terms of the European racing, because you could get that access, that same day real-time access now via the internet. So, writing about Miguel Indurain, Marco Pantani, all these guys, Tony Rominger, all these guys that were the stars in those days. We didn't know at the time what they were doing because there was some other stuff going on, which would later play out over the next, really, it's kind of started in those mid-90s with the whole EPO and the doping and everything.
Yeah.
But so, for the first couple of years, it was just really kind of old school European bike racing with European names. And then that's when Lance got cancer. I mean, he went to the Olympics in 96. I mean, his big goal was to win the gold medal in Atlanta. He didn't win it there. He wasn't feeling great. And then I think it was that fall, they diagnosed his cancer. And so everyone at the time thought, well, here's the guy who just won the world championships, which is a big deal in cycling. In 94, he was still quite young, 24-ish. Everyone thought he was going to be the next big star. Suddenly he gets cancer. And so American cycling was really almost on its knees. And then 1998 had this massive doping scandal with the Festina affair where, it was pretty lurid stuff. Great as a journalist, man. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Right.
These doping scandals were wild to cover. I mean, back in those days, the internet was there, but, it was still pre-iPhone, so, you still had to file your story. You still had to meet deadlines. The news was coming out of still kind of more traditional lanes of
yes. So you're not just live tweeting things and stuff. You have to find people, talk to them, get sources, not say a source says this or I'm hearing this. It's like, and that's how about like the language and all that? Like, what is that like in that period? Because the whole world zeroes in on the sport in a way like it hadn't before, not in a good way. So are you, as your head spinning at first, or like licking your chops as a reporter? All those hours of covering town council and other things kind of come in handy at that point because you have to be like a journalist in a way, right?
Yeah, oh, for sure. It was on the language side. It was definitely frustrating because everything was in French, Italian. I spoke Spanish at the time, There was a funny story I remember because I studied and studied abroad in Mexico and did a lot of traveling in Latin America. So I kind of had like the Latin American lilt and kind of language, and even the vocabulary is different. So I remember one of my first press conferences was with Miguel Indurain, who was the big Spanish superstar of the day, pre-Tour de France press conference. Miguelon, Big Mig, comes walking in, sits down. This was like just literally hundreds of journalists all pressed in. Everyone's getting their tape recorders in there. No iPhones yet, and then Indurain starts speaking, Spanish, which is rapid fire, mouth shut.
Right.
I was like, what the hell did he just say? I'm like, I speak Spanish. So I had to like listen to my tape recorder, slow it down. But yeah, you have to pick up Spanish, or you have to pick up French, you have to pick up Italian. It's a great way to learn languages by covering international
thrown into
cycling.
the fire, basically.
Yeah.
So you bounce back and forth, Europe summers, back to the U.S. You're living like this amazing snowbird almost lifestyle if you're a retiree. Dream world, I guess, when you're 20-something, 30. What about now? How long? Where are you now? Where are you based? And how has that evolved over the years covering the sport or in your life?
Yeah. So on a personal side, I met a Spanish woman who is now my wife, Maria Jesus, whom I love very much. We are happily married now since early 2000s, got married. And so I live basically, I didn't realize this when I got married, that when you marry a Spanish woman, it's a package deal, right? You not only marry her, but you get the whole family, you get the hometown, you get this whole extended world, and you become part of that, which is in many ways has allowed me to stay here. I mean, if I'm honest, I might have probably gone back to the States at a certain point because, was it sustainable in the long term? I don't know, but having a base here was key. And of course, being married made that much easier. And with that comes what they call in Spanish enchufe, which is basically contacts, right? So when you need paperwork done, you need to call the plumber, you have to get your car fixed. Mm-hmm. It's not going on the website and looking at some rating service and figuring out which person to go to. It's like, no, you call up your uncle who works in and he can give you, go talk to Luis. He's been my mechanic for 30 years and he'll take care of your car. Same in France, probably, like in terms of paperwork, getting stuff done.
Oh, yeah. You don't get me started on the paperwork thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Spain's been good to you in many ways. So all that happens. Armstrong comes back, brings it to a whole other level in the U.S. Back to the hustling thing. I guess people are coming to you now because you are in a place where news is really happening. I mean, this is beyond being a local reporter in Vail. Like, everybody in the U.S. wants the news, what's going on there. And so does this just take your, I guess, opportunities to another level for you career-wise?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, for sure. Because, with Lance and his arrival as the Tour de France winner, really, and he was, at the time, people maybe weren't around in those days or just kind of forget, he quickly became an A-list sports figure in America, right? I mean, he was up there with Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, Lance. I mean, he was a brand, from 99 when he first won, by 2002, he was going on Letterman, he was dating Sheryl Crow, he had all these big time, riding mountain bikes with President Bush,
Livestrong bracelets and
Livestrong bracelets, everything. I mean, he was a worldwide phenomenon. And, so there was plenty of media opportunities there. And it was interesting, too. I actually started stringing for the Dallas Morning News, which was like the big daily newspaper of record in Texas.
Right. Because he's from Texas.
Yeah, he's from Texas. So got a lot of work through them at the time. And it's fair enough to them. They right from the start, they were like, don't ignore these stories about doping, because the stories were starting already. People were saying, how can you do this? You had cancer, you had chemotherapy, how can you crush everyone? And so that story unfolded over the arc of Lance's racing career. He retired in 2005, but he's come back with his media project. He has his podcast. He has some other things going. So he's still a voice, but he's definitely removed from the daily conversation. It's like he has his voice via his own personal platforms. But again, those were like really dark days again in cycling. We've kind of come out of it. There's this whole new generation that's really leading the way for international cycling, which people kind of believe is on a much cleaner level than it's ever been.
Yeah. So I've been to the tour a few times living in France, and bumped into you, or we met up and had dinner at a couple nice places, which is fun. But you live in this circus, and there's people watch it, especially in the US, who want to come just see a day of it, which turns into like 10 minutes, actually, if you see one day, depending on how the peloton is stretched out. What is that like? I guess just quickly, how do you cover a day as a journalist of the Tour de France? Because it is a giant moving circus, as I said, and it's going like 150 miles or more some days across crazy places. You are there at the finish line to do interviews, I assume, pretty much always. Then you have to kind of chase them. How does that come together? How does a journalist, because you're not in a helicopter, clearly.
Yeah, a lot of time in a car. There's two parallel worlds in the Tour de France. One are those of us who have credentials. We get a press badge, and plus a kind of a sticker that goes in your car that says press, on France. And that allows you access in and out of the race course every day to get you into the start, gets you into the finish. Without that, you can't, there's no way to get close to the race as you found out. Then there's the other world of the fans trying to watch the race. Maybe we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Because, it's a great experience going to the tour, and there's a lot of kind of good tips that I could share with people about how to do it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, basically for us, covering the tour, you basically rent a car. It's very expensive. You rent a car these days, you're looking at least $3,000 to $4,000 to rent a car, for a month. You basically need it for a month.
Mm-hmm.
You know how expensive gas is in Europe. How expensive tolls are in Europe. So just right there, you're looking at about at least $5,000 just for a car, gas and tolls for the month, at least.
And you need hotels and all that stuff. Yeah.
Then you need 30 nights of hotels, 30 days of eating, 30 days of drinking.
Of course. Yeah,
because I mean these days, we're not fueled by rosé and Vin Rouge, but back in the day that was an essential part of our daily routine. Right. My liver survived, thankfully.
Yeah.
But
so are you showing up you kind of follow the race in the car or whatever, but you've got to get yourself to the finish line before they do anyway. And of course you don't have to go on that day's course, but you're not out there like on the roads watching them go by as a journalist, which is what a fan would do. You need to be there when they get there. So some days I guess that's a 2-hour drive. Some days it's an hour because they're doing a giant loop and coming back not so far from where they started. But you have to get yourself there, do the interviews, capture whatever you're capturing, file a story, then you're checking into another hotel, I guess, which you will promptly leave in the morning, and then go to the next. Is that kind of how it works? It's not like following a baseball team or something, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's definitely basically 24/7 operation. I mean, we get up, you have to book your hotels months in advance. I already have reservations for this summer's Tour de France. As soon as that route is announced, you're booking hotels because the teams obviously need the hotels, all the race officials, all the people working on the tour. They got literally thousands of people that build the apparatus of the race every day. Maybe not thousands, but several hundred people. Put up the fencing, put up the start-finish areas. They've got the podium girls, they got all the race officials. They got the UCI people. All the teams have at least, I'd say, maybe 60 people on the race. Wow. So that's 30 hotels per team. So, and then you have all the tour groups coming in, Trek Travel, all these big groups. Yeah. So hotels are a premium if you want to be close to start and finish every day, which you don't want to have to drive an hour and a half after every stage. So basically our routine, get up pretty early, 7, 8 o'clock. I mean, back in the day, I used to try to bring my bike and ride, but that's impractical, really. I mean, you might be able to ride your bike maybe 5-7 days in the course of a month. Everyone these days are running, people get up in the morning, meet some friends for a run, 45 minutes just to blow out the cobwebs. Then basically the French breakfast. You go to the start. You get there 2 hours before the stage starts. You go in there and you're talking to the riders, the team managers, the sport directors, sometimes the race officials, if there's a controversy with the course. But mainly we're talking to the riders and to the team, coaches and stuff. Chasing the news, somebody crashed, somebody lost time, what the expectations are, the news, plus you're trying to do some features on, these days it's real interesting in terms of how they train, the nutrition, how they prepare. The bike tech is always interesting. New wheels, the technology in cycling's changed so much in 25
It's
years.
crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, so everything's
they're like
high
cars.
tech.
Yeah,
they're like Formula One cars.
Yeah.
So a lot of our reporting now is on that kind of stuff. So then, getting from start to finish, you have two options. Basically, you actually can drive the race course, or now they have this thing called the Hors course, which is start to finish on public roads. So they have kind of a system with these kind of arrows that will lead you the way. So you can but you're in traffic, you're in with the public. So if you get caught in a traffic jam, you're just caught in a traffic jam. But there is a way for us to get into, you drive into the host town city that's hosting the finish. There'll be a way for us to get into where the press room is. Usually that press room is going to be like a massive gymnasium or some sort of sports center or Congress hall. Sometimes we're in tents on the top of a mountain. But we used to have a race radio, which has the frequency, which has all the information about the breakaways, about the action in the race and the splits. And, with my former editor and boss at Velo News, John Wilcoxon, a legendary cycling journalist who's been doing it since the Merckx era. He was, I used to drive John around for quite a few years. And I learned so much from him. And, we would go in the race every day. So, we'd go to the start, get our information, but we'd have to leave before the peloton. So we'd drive down the road. And then every day there's an airplane that flies right above the race that beams this kind of closed circuit signal.
Oh, geez, really?
So if you go too far up the road, you lose the signal. So you'd have to kind of stay within a sweet spot. So we would drive ahead, listen on the race radio, see who's in the breakaway. Especially if an American rider was in the break, in the escape of the day, we'd wait for them to drive past. Then we'd get behind them and follow them along. And it was just a whole different way of seeing the race. It was about as close as you can get. And then also lately they've been offering motorcycle access for print journalists where you can get on the motorbike and follow behind the race and ahead and behind the race. And that's really where you just see how insanely dangerous it is.
You're sitting there holding on to the guy?
Yeah. I've done that quite a few, maybe 5 or 6 times over the years. But then you just see how crazy it is with the fans on the road, how dangerous it is. I mean, cycling is a truly dangerous sport. I mean, it's just a testament to how well these people, these professional men and women, how good they are at bike handling, how they can, descend. You see these roads in Europe, man, it's like they're flying down these roads at 80, 90 miles an hour or 70, 100K an hour. You see it, you go skiing, you're coming back, and it's like, one
Crazy.
Side down, mate. It's 300-meter drop into some gorge. There's no fence. There's no barrier. And, unfortunately, people have died in this sport, and it's a tragedy that happens.
I was having this debate with a friend. We were on a mountain bike ride, and he's a very good mountain biker, and he was saying, the bike skills on mountain biking so much better. And I was like, you don't understand how good those guys are on road bikes, how good they can handle bikes. And you see it when they have to, like when they have to do something at high speed, how adept they are just controlling the bike. I mean, it's clearly in mountain biking, you have obstacles, so you can see how good those guys are. But road cyclists, I think the layperson thinks it's just like straight ahead. It's all about fitness, point it downhill and have the guts to do it. But they are very, very good at handling bikes. And when things go wrong, you can see it, that the reaction time they have at such crazy speeds. Anyway, I want to talk about the fan perspective, because that was, I think there's so many people with this on their bucket list of travels, go see a cool sporting event, and they see the madness on the side of the road, the Dutch corner and all these different things in different places. First of all, craziest thing you've seen fan-wise. I mean, it is getting dangerous where people just do stupid things as well. We have mountain bikers launching themselves over the peloton. That guy does it every year. You just wait for it. The cyclist must think that's insane. But what have you seen that's crazy? And then I know you got a couple tips on how to see it. And maybe the Tour de France is not the one to go and see up close. You've got opinions on that as well, right? So I guess go ahead, give us the Andy Hood secret sauce to this.
Yeah, in terms of crazy stuff, like you said, it is absolutely insane. You've seen everything from people dropping their drawers to moon the peloton, to people lifting their shirts to flash the peloton. Yeah. You see, there's some really quite original and funny costumes people come up with. Remember the guy back in the Armstrong days with the big elk antlers on his head? The Superman. And
they want to run beside them too for some reason.
They want to run. They want to run with the peloton. And that's one of the great things about cycling, right? It's like how close fan can get to these guys. It's not like it's not in a stadium, right? That whole fan experience is, it's an all day commitment. You have to get up there early. You want to go on Alpe d'Huez. You need to get there the night before. I mean, one thing that's maybe most people don't know is just trying to get close to the race is a challenge, because now, especially with some of the terrorist attacks they've had in France with people driving and into crowds and stuff.
Right.
So the security kind of bubble around the Tour is much more strict than it used to be. Mm-hmm. Like back in the day, you could just drive your car up the night before or even the morning of, park on the side of the road, bring your jugs of wine, bring your baguettes, bring your saucisson, just make a day of it, right?
Right.
And you can still kind of do that, but physically getting there, like there's a perimeter now around, especially the major mountain summit finishes where, the roads are closed maybe 10 Ks before the climb.
Right.
So,
and at a certain time too, you can't get past a certain point as well, right? The day before, the night or the morning of, they start shutting down roads nearby. So you have to have a plan. You almost have to leapfrog. If you're going to come to the Tour for several days, it's basically you have to kind of leapfrog. You'll see the fans that do, there's all these hardcore fans. You'll see them every day on the road, these Belgian fans or the Wout van Aert fan club or, the Slovenians that come for Pogacar now. They'll be there every day. And what they do is they'll be at when the stage finishes, they'll have their party, they'll finish up, but they'll pack up either that night or the first thing in the morning and drive to the next day's course and post up. So if you're trying to just get on the side of a road somewhere in across anywhere in France, that's usually pretty easy. But if you're trying to get to the mountaintop finishes, the Alpe d'Huez, the Mont Ventoux, that you need to be there almost the day before. And we've done that where we've gone up Mont Ventoux and we gone up there the night before and just made the whole party scene and done stories about that. Yep.
And it's crazy, it's like people up there all night long. People are setting up DJs with the Euro tech music. You know how the Euros are. They love to dance. They love to chant and they love to sing.
It's an ski scene, basically.
It's après ski. It's, on the side of some friggin' mountain in the middle of the French Alps. It's pretty surreal. And then finally when, another big draw during the Tour is the publicity caravan, right? So
this is wild.
This whole crazy thing, It's a mix of kind of quiche, kind of like gaudy, kind of almost, it's kind of like some weird, something from, from the past.
Brand giveaways. So we should explain. It's like a caravan that comes before. So if you're out there, I guess back up. Best place to see them is on a climb, the riders, because it stretches out. So you're watching. It's not just like boom, like a tennis ball going by. If you're on flat ground, that's the case. But if you want to watch them, the peloton gets stretched out on a big climb, so you at least get about 15 minutes of entertainment if it's really stretched out. But before the peloton comes through, like an hour or something before, is basically a promotional caravan, if I'm describing it correctly. Every brand that has a sponsorship on the Tour, that sponsors the Tour, has got like a little truck or something. And then there's people doing giveaways. They might be throwing like little pound cakes or whatever the hell it is, keychains. And you kind of need to have a head on a swivel because you can get blasted by something. I mean, I had keychain fly by my ear and I was like, what the hell is this thing? And it's entertaining in a way, but you look at the street and you're like, there's this shit everywhere on the ground. These little tchotchkes, I guess you'd call it. Am I describing it correctly? What this thing is?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, just random little stuff like little plastic, a lot of it's nothing that you would ever keep, but because you're there at the Tour de France, people seem to I've seen like grown men push babies out of the way to grab one of those keychain holders, right? So
right, yeah, it's just branded stuff, essentially a way for the sponsors to get their brand to the people who are lining the streets. So it makes sense on an advertising standpoint. But okay, so I think, any more advice on Tour de France, or we got it covered? I know you believe that there's some other cycling races that are a bit more accessible in this day and age. You've told me that in the past. So big picture, you're amateur cyclist in the US, let's say, and you want to come watch a Grand Tour, but Tour de France, as you said, is a bit difficult to infiltrate. What are the other, spots that you think are, because you go everywhere, Giro d'Italia, Spain, you've been everywhere. What would you say is, like, if I want access, little more low key access to cycling, but still the highest level, where would you go?
Yeah, I mean, you could think about it in a certain way to compare it to, say, American sports. The Tour de France would be like the Super Bowl or the World Series. So let's go with the World Series. So Tour de France, World Series. But you have a whole season to get to the World Series, right? So basically the season starts now. Our first big race has already happened in Australia. And this past week, things are starting to happen in Europe. So you have kind of like, you almost compare like winter training camps and spring training, which happens in December and January. And that's when the teams kind of first get together. They have all the new riders come in, the new bikes. They'll go, usually it's all along the coast in Spain. I was just down there in December and in January, go down there always to do interviews and check out the new stuff. And that's a great place to be because the big stars are there. They're not racing, they're just training every day. And, you can actually ride with the pros because they'll just go out and they're riding on the open roads in Spain. So, you'll see the Peloton will ride by. I mean, if you're fit enough, right?
Yeah, right. That's a big if.
It's a big if. Yeah. Just, you don't want to be up there kind of doing pulls with Remco Evenepoel, but,
right.
You can ride off the back of their little Peloton and they can't tell you not to, in fact, they don't seem to mind. So they're just like, they're out doing a 5-hour ride and you'll see fans, people now these days with the iPhone, it's even easier. You'll see, fans will go out and ride with the pros, as long as they can, or they'll go up and hang out on some of these climbs that they do. There's a famous climb down there called Col de Rates, which is a climb down near Alicante. And it's where a lot of the pros in the winter do their power testing and they'll go up there and just do some, training intervals and stuff. And so there'll be almost like a race feeling up there. Not a lot of people, but several dozen fans will be there hanging out, watching Pogacar go by. And it's just random. You have no idea when they're going to show up. That's a kind of a nice spot. But then a lot of these early season races are just the best way. Like next week, I'm going to it's called the Volta Algarve, which is in southern Portugal. Great winter weather, usually in the 60s, low 70s. All the big hitters are going there. Roglic will be there. Vingegaard is going to be there. Remco normally is there. Geraint Thomas is there. A lot of these races are the first races of the season. Sepp Kuss will be there. So, as a journalist, it's a great place to be. But as a fan, you go to the start, and that's when you can really get close to the riders because you go to the Tour de France, all the team bus area is all fenced off. You can't even get close to the riders anymore at the Tour. But if you go to a race like Paris-Nice, the Criterium du Dauphiné, which is in June, which is kind of like almost like the playoffs for the World Series, because that's what everyone is already really riding at
ramping
top
up
form. They're in tour shape already in June. And man, you go to the race, this is in the middle of France, around Lyon, around Annecy, that's where these races are held. And there's maybe, there might be a couple thousand French fans hanging around. But yeah, it's a great place to see the racers up close. And, they're not as stressed out. The Tour is a big stress time for those guys. So you go to a race like, Paris-Nice, you want an autograph from these guys. It's a lot easier to do that, at these other races. And it's a lot better time to visit because, especially the Dauphiné, it's one of my favorite races of the year because it's like the Tour de France, but it's unlike the Tour de France because there's not the crowds, it's not as hot. there's not that much stress around the whole event. So,
Right.
and then
So
plus
for
you get to
you,
hang out in France and you could get good food and just a good wine.
right. So as a journalist, there's probably more accessibility, but as a fan, you can kind of see the inner workings because I mean, I worked in the golf industry. That was the fascinating part is I got to go in the tour truck. And if you get a glimpse of that as a fan of cycling, you'll probably see them like working on the bikes or them chatting. You just see the inner workings that you don't really get to see on TV because they're covering a race, right? And you might just bump into things you wouldn't see. What about riding? I've kept you a long time here because you've got some cool stories, but you've probably ridden some of these. I've ridden a few of these, I'll say stages, but let's say cols or climbs. And if people, I think they make a trip of that where they want to see the race, but then they might go ride something else nearby. I guess fair warning for the amateur cyclist, this is no joke, some of these places. I mean, I've done a few of them just to climb. I mean, I'm clearly not built like a 50-kilo cyclist, but it's hard work. But it's quite an experience. So you can go watch the race, but then go do another climb that might be an hour or two away. You've done some of them, I assume, just to get a taste for it. Any favorite climbs?
Yeah, once like you said, in
That
France.
didn't kill you.
Yeah, all those climbs are just mythic, right? I mean, Alpe d'Huez, Mont Ventoux, the Tourmalet.
I did the Tourmalet. Was brutal.
Tourmalet is brutal, man.
I did the Tourmalet.
They're all brutal, man.
Way too hot. It was way too hot. And people are like, did you do the loop? It's like a 200K loop. I was like, no. I rode to the base of the climb. I did the climb. That was enough. Back down. Yeah. You get appreciation for the fact that these guys are just aliens. I mean, when you ride one yourself, just do one, and you can't even comprehend the speed that they do it at, which is cool. As you said, you can be there. It's not in a stadium. So you can go on another day, the day after, and ride the same ride they do because no one will be there in a way, right? And there'll be the chalk drawings on the ground, and you get the feeling, but you won't deal with the crowds. And it's unique in that way, the sport.
Oh, for sure. I mean, all those climbs are if you're a cyclist, it's like bucket list stuff, right? And that's what a lot of people do. You're right. They come over, they'll watch the race, they'll do these climbs. I know a lot of the organized paid tours. Sometimes they're quite expensive, but if you got the money, that's the best way to go because a lot of these paid tours will have kind of access to the race that you don't get as a fan. And I know like some of these paid tours that you are riding on the stage some days, and they'll have like a viewing area set up just for the paying members of like on Alpe d'Huez. I don't want to mention names because a lot of people do it. I don't want to play favorites, but any of those high end cycling tours, if you got the money, it's definitely worth it if you're like a keen cyclist because they have mechanics, they've got massage every night, they got 5-star restaurants. I mean, it's like living. That's the best way to get into it as a fan if you've got the cash. If you don't have it, yeah, you can kind of wing it as a freelancer. But riding those climbs is amazing. I mean, the best place to go really, there's like right at the base of Alpe d'Huez, there's a camping ground. And one year, way back in the day, I went there after the tour. After the tour had finished, I drove back down there in my rental car. I posted up in this campground. Whole place was full of cyclists. There's a swimming pool there. There's a bar in the campground. Yeah, I think back in the day, it was like $20 a day to camp there. So I stayed for the whole week. And just every day rode Alpe d'Huez a couple times. Glandon is around the corner. The Galibier is on the other side. And it's just like going, if you're a golfer, going to play at Augusta for a couple of rounds, or Pebble Beach. So yeah, my only advice to anybody that does that is swallow your pride and put a compact on your front chain ring because you'll need it. Unless you're really, really fit. Yeah.
And be in shape when you get there. I did Alpe d'Huez. It wasn't horrible. I mean, I said, hey, the goal here is just to get to the top. So you start smartly. And then Alpe d'Huez wasn't terrible. Tourmalet was a lot harder, I felt like. And we have a bunch here around Annecy that are formidable. Let's say some knows and others. So you can walk out the door and do it. But, well, cool, man. Thanks. I guess last question is like, where's the world of cycling now? You talked about this journey. You must be excited. There's some superstars in the sport. What are you looking for this summer ahead as you're, as we say, gallivanting across Europe? And getting inside all these different tours. It's an exciting time, I guess, to be a journalist and a cycling fan, right?
Yeah, in fact, I'm actually writing a piece. It's going to go up in Velo. Just like, I think my headline's going to be, in 25 years covering the sport, it's never been so good, kind of thing. Okay. And it's really true. Like you said, there's the good thing about having been in the sport for so long is that you just see these new generation of riders coming through. As you mentioned, I kind of got the Lance generation for the good and bad that came with that, and then after that, there was a whole new generation that came through. At least the Americans, Taylor Phinney, all these kind of great riders, TJ Van Garderen, and now we're into the Sepp Kuss, Matteo Jorgensen's, Kristen Faulkner, Chloe Dygert on the women's side. So it never gets boring in terms of it's like the Tour de France again. It's like, no, the Tour de France every year is like this amazing soap opera, cliffhanger blockbuster movie that has different story, different actors, different. It's like a Marvel super world where but the storyline changes. It never gets boring.
No shortage of drama either.
No shortage of drama. Every day something crazy happens to the Tour, and it's never boring. But the sport is, I think, in a much better place. It's a much healthier place. In terms of technology, the way the bike tech has changed. Just like you said before, it's like Formula One. The way these guys are training, the way their nutrition works, the coaching, the aerodynamics. People are saying, how can they be going faster than ever before? But when you look at it, there's things that have been happening that can put the sport where it is right now, without going to the dark side. And, you have, this generation of riders that, we have this guy, Tadej Pogačar, right now, who is just doing things that we've never seen since really like the days of Eddie Merckx. And, and the classics are, really had a boom in the last, 10, 20 years in these one-day races like Paris-Roubaix, the Tour of Flanders. We got Mathieu van der Poel, who's the big man these days. So then in the women's sport is really taking off. It's so much more professional and deeper. They got the Tour de France Femme. And you get gravel racing, right? Gravel racing is just booming over the last 10 years. And so the sport is in the best place it's ever been. And the stories never get boring. It's like at the end of every season, I am totally burned out. I have to disconnect. Like this year I went to Cambodia for 3 weeks. Go back to the United States, eat chili dogs and, have some good American food. But by the time, December rolls around and now it's like, okay, February, like the races are starting and I'm excited. And it's always, hitting the restart button, but it is a restart. It's new, it's fresh, exciting.
Yep.
It's been a dream. It's been a dream ride and we'll see how much longer I last.
Yeah. Well, it's cool to watch. I mean, you've fashioned a career out of it all and took advantage of the opportunities when they came. So, yeah, it's been cool as someone who got to meet you when I was a young cub reporter and trying to fashion out a career and see someone like you who is like, yeah, you hustle. It didn't come by accident. I mean, you're a talented guy, but you hustled and so yeah, congrats to you. And it's fun to watch because it's fun to read your stuff too because you're a good writer. So where can people follow you and follow your stuff if they're a cycling fan or if they just want to learn more about the sport?
Yeah, so Velo News now is Velo. We changed the name a couple years ago.
Okay.
So it's Velo. It's part of this outside project that, some great ideas there in terms of creating a platform, creating kind of a, a community of all these kind of, they have Outside Magazine, some of these other legacy brands, Ski Magazine, Backpacker, Triathlon, yoga, all these kinds of things are under this one group.
Yep.
There's a paid package that goes with that. So there's also some great apps, some map tracking apps. Map My Ride is in there. Gaia GPS, Trailforks. I mean, if you're an off-road cyclist, Trailforks is the way to go for cycling, for gravel and stuff. So, it's an exciting project to be on in terms of that end of professional aspect of my current situation. So, yeah, I'm exclusively for those guys. I'm full-time. I've been with them now, started with the old Velo News, but now I've been with Outside for like the last 5 years.
You're writing every day during the tour, sometimes a couple stories every day, but Velo is the place mostly for you once the season kicks off. That's where people can go to see your work.
Yeah, Velo, we got a podcast going. We got a lot of stuff on social media. We're doing shorts, we're doing Instagram, YouTube shorts. We're doing longer form video. We're doing, getting into, I don't know if we're doing TikTok or not. I think we don't know if it's going to be around.
You don't know, you just don't know it.
Yeah, I just don't know it. Yeah. So like, that's the thing with the journalism these days, man. You got to wear many different hats, right?
Yeah.
It's like back in the day, it's one thing I think that I've been able to try to do in my personal career is always to evolve with the times, right? Mm-hmm. I've had some colleagues of mine that were just like, no, all I do is I'm a reporter, I'm a journalist. That's all I want to do. Yeah. And a lot of those guys don't have jobs anymore because it's like, you got to be able to change with the times. And that media goals post, it changes every 3 months, every 3 weeks, right? So
just where people are going, right? Where are they going to get their news?
People are, majority of our users now are on iPhones or smartphones. 80% of our audience, I think, is on, that's true for all media. People are getting their news from Twitter or from Instagram, from
podcasts,
from podcasting. Yeah. So you have to roll with the times, definitely. Work hard and roll with the times and don't burn bridges.
Mm-hmm.
You know that.
You've rolled with the times. Clearly, it's been fun to watch. I thank you for joining me here today. It's been fun to catch up and rehash some of the old days, but also get the insight too, because you've lived it like no one else. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me. It's good catching up, brother.
Well, that was fun catching up with Mr. Andrew Hood, cycling journalist extraordinaire. He's got some great stories. He's an entertaining guy. Always good to catch up with him, too. I've seen him a few times as I've gone out and watched the Tour de France when he comes through town, or gone out to meet him somewhere near a stage and had a little dinner and a little red wine with him. Good guy, Andrew Hood. And as I said, good writer. Check him out online. Follow him. He's on Instagram. He's on Twitter, X, whatever they call it now, at EuroHoodie. And also check him out on Velo. And now you have some tips, too, if you ever wanted to go watch a grand cycling tour in Europe. He's giving you the inside scoop on what to do. Thanks again for listening. And, back soon with another episode.